critical in your response. Provide a bibliography page at the end and use APA format. If you don't know how to do that, check the library for citing sources. And you can also get essay help from the Center for Academic Writing. There is a website here for that link. Okay, so make sure you get onto that quickly because it comes up in a short period of time. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is talk about gender categories. Here's some definitions of the spectrum of gendered categories you can find in society. Okay, for many people, gender does not match with the gender they were assigned at birth. When you're born, you have a biological sex. You either have a penis or a vagina. There's about a small percentage of the population are born with ambiguous genitalia, but what they do with with this category is they turn them either into a boy or a girl. So at birth, one's biological sex leads to assumptions regarding gender. And this proves that gender is a social construct. It's something that's socially created. So if you're born with a penis, you are given the category of boy, which assumes a masculine characteristic. If you're born with a vagina, you're assumed to be feminine. And this gets socially constructed as you grow. So biological sex categories are assigned at birth. However, identifying your gender can be more diverse than simply seeing yourself as male or female. So maybe in your self, in your sense of who you are, you might not identify with the gender you're born with. So you might go beyond seeing yourself simply as a male or a female. So what this is saying is that people express gender in various ways. Gender is an identity, it's an expression. It's not biologically determined. The biological determinist argument holds that, that each gender has an essential category. But we know that people express gender in various ways. Okay, sex and identity. People do not always fit their gender and the roles that they imply. Some people feel their biological sex does not fit with who they are, with their identity. Some feel more comfortable in the opposite sex or in some different sex category. So even if you're born with a biological sex, it might not fit with who you think you are. And there should be nothing wrong with that. But society puts pressure on girls to be feminine, boys to be masculine. Okay, so we need to get a little bit further into this idea of gender and some of the identities that go along with it. Okay, now to begin with, the term cisgender denotes a person whose sense of personal identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex. So cisgender means that someone who's born a boy feels more masculine. Someone born a girl feels more feminine. So the gender corresponds with their birth sex in the case of the cisgender. So that's pretty basic. But then there is the transgender. A transgender person feels that their gender is different from their physical or biological sex. Transgender denotes or relates to a person whose sense of personal identity and gender does not correspond with their birth sex. So they're transgender. They're transformative. They don't simply accept their biological physical sex. Now, when the word transsexual goes often along with transgender, but a transsexual is a person who emotionally and physiologically or psychologically feels that they belong to the opposite sex. So this is a person whose emotions and psychology do not match with the sex that they have, but actually with the opposite sex. A transsexual person may choose to undergo surgery to affirm their sex as opposite to the one assigned. So the difference between a transsexual and a transgender could just be anyone who thinks that they feel different from their biological sex, but a transsexual is one who is willing to undergo surgery to affirm their sex as opposite. So that's the difference there between transgender and transsexual. Moving on. Transgender is a spectrum or broad range of non-traditional gendered identities and behavior. Now, a transgender usually includes all trans people, but some transsexuals do not even identify with this term. So a transsexual person might not like the term transgender because they feel that they are different. They are transsexual. They're willing to undergo surgery to change their sex. Okay, here's another term you've heard about. You have the LGBTQ community. What does queer mean? Queer is a term for people of marginalized gendered identities and sexual orientations who are not cisgender or heterosexual. This term has a complicated history as a reclaimed slur. So the word queer often denoted somebody who was different and disliked in society, but some people have reassumed this queer notion, taken it in as part of who they are. Okay, so the term queer is a reclaimed slur. Another word you might have heard about is, there's a march called the slut walk. The slut walk was a term that was retaken by women who were offended by the term, but actually took it in as being a part of themselves in order to protest the entire issue. The slut walk happened when the policeman said that women should not dress as slut if they want to avoid getting sexually assaulted. Women were offended by that, and so they started what they called the slut walk. So the slut was a reclaimed slur, and the same thing goes with queer. It's a reclaimed slur. Okay, next. Gender diverse is a category associated with people who are transgender. They may have a gender identity that is not simply a man or a woman. So the word gender diverse refers to a range of gender characteristics. that may feel more comfortable to those who take them in. And, okay, intersex. Intersex people are born with any of several variations in sex characteristics, including chromosomes, gonads, hormones, or genitalia. Intersex people are born with any of several variations in sex characteristics in terms of chromosomes or sex hormones. So therefore, there are many states of intersex that are not always obvious to others. So you might have different chromosomes or hormones, and as a result, your intersexuality might not be so obvious to other people. Okay, now why have I gone through this? It's important to have these definitions in your notes because they come up throughout the year. And these definitions help to delineate between categories because definitions are precise language, and it is important to be precise when dealing with something as complex as gender. So this is a basic summary of some of the gendered categories that we will be talking about. Okay, the next thing that I would like to go through is what is sociology? As I said, I'm a sociologist. There are various disciplines in academia, and sociology is one of them. It goes along with anthropology, political science, history, and criminology. So let's go into a little bit about what sociology is. Okay, so let's go over here. What is sociology? Now, the word sociology in Latin breaks down this way. Socio means companionship. Logi means reason. So when you put it together, sociology is the reason for companionship. Now, I'm going to talk about what is sociology. I'm going to give you some definitions of what it is. I'm going to talk a little bit about the emergence of sociology as a discipline. I'm going to talk about how it is a scientific approach, which is different from common sense. I'm going to look at two important sociological theories, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what the difference is between sociology and psychology. Okay, what is sociology? Sociology is an attempt to understand how membership in one's social group affects individual behavior. So the sociologist looks at how the group influences the individual. So whereas the psychologist is focused more on the individual, the sociologist looks at how the social group affects that individual. Okay, here's a working definition of sociology. Sociology is the systematic study of human behavior, the groups to which one belongs, the societies that human beings create, and within which their lives unfold. So let's put that all together. Sociology is a systematic study of human behavior, the groups to which one belongs, the societies that human beings create, and within which their lives unfold. This is a very complete definition. It talks about human behavior, groups, societies, and people's lives and how they're all connected. Now, all social sciences study patterns of behavior. A quest to understand patterns of behavior is found in many disciplines, like psychology, anthropology, political science, criminology, to name a few. Sociology is another discipline in study of society. Sociology is concerned with the individual amidst human societies. Sociologists believe that humans are social animals. Sociology is a scientific approach. Its roots are in positivism, which we're all about hypothesis testing. It's a systematic approach. It uses different methods, procedures, and theories in doing research. And it's informed by founding fathers like Auguste Comte, Karl Marx, Max Weber, and Emile Durkheim. So sociology is concerned, scientific, systematic, and informed. Okay, now we all display social sensitivity, a sensitivity to the society. We're always interested in the behavior of others. We are curious about our behavior and the behavior of others. We often ask questions like, why do we behave the way we do? How are we the same as others? And how are we different from others? Having this sense of why we are the way we are and how we're the same as others and how we're different from others is all about social sensitivity. Now, these are three example questions that a sociologist might ask. Why are divorce rates higher among the less educated? Why are more residents of BC alcoholic compared to Newfoundland? Why do Francophones place more emphasis on economic achievement than Anglophones? Okay, let's quickly try to answer these sociologically. Why are divorce rates higher among the less educated? Often this has to do with their ability to communicate. They're not able to express their feelings to each other, so they're less likely to get along in that sense. It also might have something to do with their income that they earn because they're less educated. So often marriages break up because people do not have enough money. So those are a couple of sociological reasons for that. Okay, why are more residents of BC alcoholic compared to Newfoundland? We've all heard the stories of the Newfie screech and the drunken Newfie, and so people from Newfoundlanders you should assume have more alcoholism, but actually it's people from BC. Now the reason for this, Durkheim would explain it by the term anomie, because people from BC are often from somewhere else. They move west, they start a new life, so they are less rooted in their culture. So they tend to be more alcoholic than those from Newfoundland. Okay, lastly, why do Francophones place more emphasis on economic achievement than Anglophones currently? It's because the Francophone historically resisted Anglophone materialism. They went through a stage called le survivance, or survival. They lived on the land, they stayed close to their Catholic church. But after what was called the Quiet Revolution in the 60s, Francophones now place more emphasis on economic achievement than Anglophones. I did a lot of research into this. My study was of French and English and Penetangre. So those are three examples of sociological type questions and some of the answers that sociologists provide. Okay, now let's go on to the emergence of sociology as a discipline. Sociology originated in the wake of the French Revolution. It was the late 18th, early 19th century, which was a time of turmoil in society. People were moving from the towns into the cities. People started working less on the land and more in factories. So sociology emerged in Europe during this time of profound social change. Sociology emerges as three revolutions took place. Three revolutions had to take place before the sociological imagination could crystallize. They are: first, the scientific revolution in the 16th century encouraged the use of evidence to substantiate theory. So rather than relying on a metaphysical explanation, like God caused the tree to fall in the forest, now scientific proof was needed. So decay in the wood, for example, might cause a tree to fall in the forest. Second, the democratic revolution in the late 18th century encouraged the view that human society could be changed. The French Revolution and the American Revolution are examples of this. They overthrew the aristocracy, created republics, both in France and in the United States. Canada did not overthrow the monarchy. Canada accepted the monarchy. That's why we have parliament, and we still have the queen as our figurehead. But the democratic revolution was the idea that people could change society, that common folk could overturn the aristocracy. And thirdly, the industrial revolution had to take place, because the industrial revolution was what gave sociologists their subject matter. People like Max Weber, for example, were very interested in how the industrial revolution impacted people's lives. Now, for sociological thought, you should see people like Marx, Weber, and Durkheim. During the late 18th, 19th century, the time of urbanization and industrialization, Marx, Weber, and Durkheim talk about how relations became more impersonal, more competitive, more contractual, more superficial, and more specialized. So whereas earlier societies were more human, more community-oriented, when people moved from the towns into the cities, they had to deal with more impersonal relations, more competitive and contractual relations, more superficial and specialized relations. Okay, now the first sociologist, the founding father, the main one, was a guy named Auguste Comte, who lived between 1798 and 1857. He was considered sociology's founding father. He believed that society can be studied in the same way as we study the natural world, empirically. So you've all heard of what the natural sciences are. They are the sciences like chemistry, physics, biology. They are natural sciences. But Auguste Comte believed that society could be studied in the same way we study the natural world, using empirical proof, using evidence. In fact, Auguste Comte called sociology social physics. Auguste Comte divided man's progress into three historical phases. First, there was the theological stage, next the metaphysical, and finally the positivistic stage. In the theological stage, supernatural agencies were used to explain what man could not explain. During the metaphysical stage, man attributes effects to abstract but poorly understood causes. But by the positive stage, man now understands scientific laws control the world. So his philosophy was called positivism. And he believed that human society could even be perfected because of positivism. So Auguste Comte was sociology's founding father. Okay, now let's go on to sociology and science. There's 7 differences between science and common sense. Common sense refers to one set of methods, whereas science refers to another type of methods. Science grows out of common sense concerns for everyday life, but science is more involved. Third, science seeks to provide generalizations regarding disparate types of phenomena, so a wide variety of phenomena. And science seeks to remove inconsistencies and incompleteness of some kind of research. So the key thing in science is validity and reliability. And fifth, so scientific theories tend to last for shorter periods of time because they're subject to more criticism. 6, science seeks explanations of a wide range of phenomena, so it's not just immediate and short term. And science seeks repeated criticism because nothing should be taken for granted. The taken for granted is the way common sense works. So, for example, in scientific journals, you'll always see the critic of one guy writes a study and the other guy comes along and criticizes because nothing should be taken for granted in science. Okay, we'll continue on here. Let's get back into it. Okay, now, as I told you, Auguste Comte's theory, his approach was called positivism. And positivism is at the root of all sociological thought. This is where sociology uses the approach called positivism by Auguste Comte, the idea that society should be studied using empirical proof, that the scientific method should be used. The scientific method, you know from your chemistry, physics, biology class, that this is the way you do it. You state an objective. You then review literature and come up with a hypothesis. You then figure out what methods you're going to use to study whatever it is you're studying. Then you provide analysis followed by a conclusion. You find this in all the natural sciences, and this was Comte's approach to looking at society. And in fact, this approach can really be found in the work of Durkheim. Durkheim's study of suicide directly uses all of these: the objective, the hypothesis, a certain methodology, analysis, and conclusion. Okay, so let's get into this a bit. Here's 2 key sociological theories: Emile Durkheim's study of suicide and C. Wright Mill's concept of the sociological imagination. Okay, according to Durkheim, suicide rates are determined by a group's level of social solidarity. Social solidarity refers to the frequency with which members interact and the degree to which they share certain beliefs, morals, and values. Okay, this is what Durkheim found in his study of suicide back in the 19th century. That suicide rates were at the lowest at the intermediate level of social solidarity and highest at the low and high levels of social solidarity. It looks like this. Okay, if you're high on social solidarity, your suicide rate might be lower. Okay, I have to find this again. Okay, we're back to the other one. Let me go over here. Okay, so when you're low on social solidarity, suicide rate is high. And when you're high on social solidarity, the suicide rate is also high. When you're low on social solidarity, Durkheim believes you will either commit egoistic or anomic suicide. Egoistic is when you're alone, you feel isolated, you have no friends. So you're more likely to commit suicide that is called egoistic. Or if you're unregulated by society. So for example, when the Great Depression, when the stock market crashed, you feel less regulated by society. So you're more likely to jump out a window or try to kill yourself because you do not feel connected with the society. So that's called anomic suicide, when you're a state of anomie, which is a state of normlessness, meaninglessness. And over on this end, if you might be high on social solidarity, too high, you'll commit altruistic suicide. This is the kind of suicide that the World Trade Center bombers committed, or the kamikaze pilot in World War II, because they were too attached, too taken over by the group. So they commit what's called altruistic suicide. For Durkheim, the best place to be is at this intermediate level of social solidarity. So you have friends, you have families, you're involved in groups, but you're not too involved. So this is the best place to be. So what he's showing here is how group life affects suicide rates. The suicide rate is not simply an individual's psychological problem. It's a problem that's caused by one's relationship to the social group, to society. So this study was done in August Comte's tradition. If you pick up the book called Suicide, it states a clear objective. It reviews literature on suicide rates. Then it states his hypothesis, which suicide has to do with social solidarity. Then he comes up with a method he used, social statistics, to prove this. And then he provided his analysis of egoistic, anomic, and altruistic suicide, founded by a conclusion. Okay, another theory, C. Wright Mills. C. Wright Mills came up with the idea that good sociologists require what he calls a sociological imagination. A sociological imagination is an awareness of the relationship between personal experience and the wider society. So the more you're able to think about how society is affected by individuals and vice versa, and the more you can take your own personal problems and issues and look at it from a wider lens, looking at it from society, the more you're showing what is called sociological imagination. Okay, let's look at the difference between sociology and psychology. Psychology has more academic and applied branches than does sociology. Here's 5 differences. Therapy is more pronounced in psychology. Psychology places more emphasis on understanding the individual. Some psychologists place emphasis on animal behavior. Sociologists do not do this. Psychology is more concerned with the physiology of the brain. This is all way beyond the spectrum of sociology. Sociology is more concerned with outside forces, not the physiology of the brain. Sociology, though, shares a branch with psychology known as social psychology. But whereas psychology moves more towards the individual, sociology moves more towards the society. In other words, you can be a social psychologist, that's more the way the sociologist thinks, or you could be more of a psychological social psychologist, which is more the way psychology works. Okay, so sociology is the systematic study of human society and social behavior. Sociology is systematic because it studies the relationships between individuals, groups, and the society human beings create. Its subject matter is huge, complex, and varied. You can be a political sociologist, an economic sociologist, a sociologist of religion, sociologist of the family. So what is sociology? It's an attempt to understand how membership in one social group affects individual behavior. Now, sociology relies on something called paradigms to investigate society, because we really, in sociology, do 3 things. All of our research contains theory, data, and analysis. So what is a sociologist? He or she is an academic who studies human society from a scientific point of view. And the sociologist operationalizes concepts, theories, and paradigms in their work. From that, they develop certain methodologies to look at society. Now, these are the paradigms in sociology. You can be a structural functionalist, you can be a conflict theorist, a symbolic interactionist, a postmodernist, or a feminist. These are all different lenses, different ways to look at the society. Now, the main methods in sociology include field methods, going out to a place and doing a study one-on-one. You can also do experiments, surveys, and you can analyze existing documents and fiscal statistics. That is what Durkheim did. He looked at the suicide rates by looking at existing documents and statistics from Europe on suicide. So overall definition, sociology is a systematic study of human behavior. Sociology is a study of powerful social forces that influence social relations and personal lives. And sociology emerged at the time of the Industrial Revolution, which was an era of massive social transformation that created new social problems that needed to be looked at. So sociology is a systematic study of human action in a social context, and is based on the idea that our relations with other people create opportunities for us to think and act, but that society also sets limits on our thoughts and actions. So society, on one hand, gives us freedom, but it also constrains us in another way. Okay, lastly, this is something to think about when you study society. You can call this a slide rule method. Remember this saying, you've all heard it before. William Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage. He said this in As You Like It in 1602. All the world is a stage. Well, here's some way to think about society. Society is like a performance. Think of these letters, P-E-R-F-O-R-M-A-N-C-E. Think of performance, and you can understand society's institutions. Why? Because society's institutions include the following: politics, economics, religion, family, organizations, recreation, mass media, action, neoliberal ideology, churches, and education. P-E-R-F-O-R-M-A-N-C-E. When you think of those letters, you can think of society, mostly in terms of these: politics, economics, religion, family, and mass media. And when you think of education at the end, you can kind of think of how society works. All of these institutions are all about education. So this is a way to think about society from the slide rule type method. Okay, let me stop here. Okay, so what I've done today is I've talked a little bit about the short paper that's coming up. I've also talked about some of the gendered categories you need to understand. And lastly, I went through what a sociologist is and what sociology is as a discipline. So that's enough for today. And hopefully you'll get right on those short papers that are due on October 6th. So make sure you get to that. Okay, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.